Hey nerds, what's up? Today I'm really excited to bring you a review of Joe Abercrombie's new book, The Devils, which I know we have all been so excited for. So this is an advanced reader copy. This book comes out in May of this year, so you have a few months to wait, but I was obviously so excited to get to this book that I have already read it and want to bring my review to you. So The Devils is about a society where there is currently a schism between the Church of the West and the Church of the East, and there is also a looming threat from the elves, which are known to be like bloodthirsty warmongering peoples. And we follow primarily two main characters, Alex and Brother Diaz. And Brother Diaz is a member of the Church of the West, and he thinks he is going to get a great accommodation when he is called to meet with the Pope, and instead he is put in charge of what's known as like the 13th delegation and has to be in charge of this group of people known as the Devils, which I will get into. And he is tasked with leading Alex, who did not know she was a princess, over into the East to claim her throne through untold dangers. Now, the Devils are a group of people kind of damned by the church for practicing black arts or things they shouldn't do, but are nonetheless very powerful. And as the tagline says, sometimes you need unholy warriors to accomplish holy things. So the first in our Devils group is Jacob of Thorn, who is a fighter who has lived for quite a long time because he was cursed to never die, no matter what kind of wounds he sustains. Then we have Baptiste, who is an individual who has pretty much done anything there has ever been to do. If she's done it, if you, this is a weird connection, but if you've ever seen the show Schitt's Creek, kind of like Alexis, she always has a story about one time she did something.
Like, I once dated this sultan's nephew who was forbidden to talk to me or even to look at me, and we made it work for like half a regime change. So
then you have Baron Rickard, who is a vampire of the most distinguished sort, and Viga, who is a werewolf trying to tame the wolf, trying to control it, but maybe not being so successful. And of course, the newest member, Balthazar, who is a magician who practices necromancy and is determined to get out of this task of delivering Alex to her throne. And then I can't forget Sunny, who is an elf that is working for the humans and can turn invisible, which matches how she feels inside, invisible to everybody. Obviously, hijinks and danger ensues, and you kind of have a fun little adventure romp with a zany cast of characters. So obviously this is a super fun premise and one that gripped me immediately. Overall, my rating for The Devils is between a 3 and a 3.5. I probably settled on a 3.5. This devastated my Instagram when I posted it. I know I'm a huge Joe Abercrombie fan. As if you guys have been following this channel, you know how much I love The First Law, and it is on one of my top 10 series of all time. And this one just didn't quite reach the heights of The Age of Madness or The Heroes, or how good I know Abercrombie actually is. This book was just kind of a little middling for me. So I'm gonna talk in non-spoilery way why I think that was, and then at the end I'll talk about whether or not I think you should read it. So as far as the good, because there is a lot of good in this book, I don't think that Joe Abercrombie can actually write a bad book. I think he is too skilled in his prose and too skilled in his characterization work that anything I read from him is going to be enjoyable. I'm going to have at least a good time. It's never going to be like, this was garbage. I just don't think he's actually capable of that. So I just want to say I had a good time. The characters were all super funny and super interesting. I always love the way he twists a character and how he can take things like vampires and werewolves, a staple of creepy creatures since forever, and put his own twist on them in a way that feels very authentic and also true to their original natures. He does a great job at that. And individually, stuff was very funny, and individually, I liked a lot of plot points that were happening in the book. Ultimately, I decided the best way to describe it is that in this case with this book, the sum of its parts were greater than the eventual whole. So when I'm talking about these individual parts, they were all good. I'm talking about each of these characters, I'm like, yeah, I liked all these characters. I'm talking about the plot, yeah, I liked it, what a great idea. But just how it all came together didn't quite make it there for me. Ultimately, I don't think there was enough plot to sustain how much novel this is. I know that has been a criticism people have had of Abercrombie before. It's generally a criticism I don't share, especially when they talk about, a lot of times people don't like journeying books. I've never had a problem with that. Like Wheel of Time is full of journeying books and I really like it. I think Before They Are Hanged is often called like the journeying book for First Law, and I really enjoyed that one. That in general as a plot point isn't a problem for me, but for whatever reason in this one it felt repetitive. It felt like, okay, they did this thing and then kind of like they did it again. Oh, and then they did it again, but it wasn't in a way that came together to feel purposeful or to feel like I was still progressing, like with characters. It didn't feel that the characters progressed enough for the plot we had. And so in some ways I wondered if we actually just had too many characters. This is a quite large cast of characters if you noticed, and I think it might have been better if Abercrombie focused on viewpointing from just a couple of them rather than almost all of them. It ended up feeling too chopped up, like we often between chapters switched between people, which is something, at least in my memory, Abercrombie didn't do a lot. He might have done it in the Heroes, which I did love. But in here, for some reason, it felt too chopped up, and I never felt like I really got to be in a character's head and really understand their journey. And in fact, I didn't feel that there was enough character movement in the characters. My favorite character ended up being Brother Diaz, surprisingly, which I wouldn't have necessarily guessed, but I felt like because I knew him the best in a lot of ways, and he went through, in my opinion, the most full character arc for a book, whereas I felt a lot of our other characters stayed static. This is a series, obviously they could still move, but I just didn't feel enough movement with them. And unfortunately, Alex, who was probably considered like, if not Brother Diaz, like our main character, was the least interesting of all the characters. I felt like there wasn't a lot going on with her. So I wondered if we only kept it from like Alex's and Brother Diaz's perspective the whole time and didn't go into the other devils' perspective, would I maybe have felt closer to them or there had been more time to develop them? As it was, for a book that's like over 550 pages, I don't feel like we accomplished a lot, when usually Abercrombie's very good at accomplishing a lot of characterization in very little time. Again, the characters were enjoyable, they're funny, but after a while it almost started feeling a little tedious because it felt like they were funny in the same ways and weren't changing. One thing with the plot, when I said there wasn't quite enough of it for me, it might have also just been the way it was presented. When we're first presented with the story that it's going to be, delivering this princess and how she becomes discovered that she's a princess, it felt so basic. I kept waiting for the classic Abercrombie twist. Where was that shoe that was going to drop? Because it always does. And then it never did. And that was really surprising for me. A word I would use probably to talk a lot about Abercrombie, it's not like Abercrombie's this grand twist master. It's not like you're going to go like, ooh, where's that twist? But I feel like Abercrombie's really good at writing inevitable stories where you're like, this is plodding along and I might not exactly know what's going to happen, but once it does, it feels inevitable because we know it's going to be this kind of, at least in First Law, depressing outlook, right? And we know it's just going to end up happening, Our main villain of the First Law is going to best everybody. And in this case, instead of feeling inevitable, it ended up just feeling predictable. When things happened at the end, I knew they were going to happen from the first page, but not in a way that felt intentional. Again, not in a way that felt, oh yes, this was inevitable. You were waiting for the shoe to drop the whole time. It was more like I was actually waiting for you to change it up in some way and then you didn't, and it then kind of fell flat because I'm used to you giving me just a little more. In fact, by the end, one thing I thought is I really loved Sharp Ends, which was Abercrombie's short story collection. I know a lot of people, by the way, skip that in First Law, and I definitely don't think you should. I loved it. There were several stories in there that followed two characters I really loved, and I think there ended up being 3 stories from them, and they were kind of split up with other stories in between. And at the end of this book, I kind of felt the Devils could have been that. The cast of characters are zany and fun, and I just love an Abercrombie character, but it didn't really feel like it needed to be a full book. Like if these characters were in Sharp Ends, like in the First Law universe or something, and we just got like 2 or 3 stories from them, I probably would have loved it. I would have been looking forward to it and been like, oh man, I love when these characters come up. Because in a short story, you don't expect quite as much, A, from a plot, and B, from a character arc, because you're more seeing a snapshot. This felt like it should have been kind of vignettes, snapshots of a character, and again, just didn't fully come together plot-wise or character-wise for a full story arc. Now, again, I put this, people on Instagram are so bummed. I know people are looking forward to this so much. Do I think you should read this? Yes, still read it. Like I said, I didn't hate it. I didn't dislike it. I gave it a 3.5. It just didn't quite live up. If you're a giant Abercrombie fan, do I think you should pick this up? Yes. I'm going to still read book 2 because where all the characters end in book 2, to me, gives me hope that some of these issues I've talked about will be fixed in book 2. I think sometimes Abercrombie takes a second to get his stride in a new series. Like, I think I did give The Blade itself 4 stars, so I did like it more than The Devils, but there was a momentum that wasn't quite there yet in Blade itself that came in the other books of the trilogy. So for me, like, even though The Devils was a 3.5, I'm still planning on definitely reading book 2 because, again, where the characters end gives me the hope that, like, kind of the plot and character arc that didn't quite get there for me could be solved in the later books. Would I tell people to start with The Devils as of right now? No, personally. Like, if they hadn't read any Abercrombie, I would choose a different novel. But yeah, if you're already a fan, you shouldn't let this dissuade you from being excited to read it. I know that, like, for example, I had some of the same issues with Best Served Cold. So maybe if you feel that way about Best Served Cold, you might agree about The Devils. But if you didn't, you might not have any problem at all with The Devils, like with specifically the problems I mentioned. Because again, it's not a problem with like writing skill, it's a problem with how it came together. So I don't want to dissuade anyone. If you're an Abercrombie fan, I think you should read it no matter what. Maybe just like it'll help going in with these expectations. Because for me, I was going in with like Age of Madness expectations. And I got like a regular Abercrombie book, you know, one of like the lesser First Law books for me. But still, you know, medium Joe Abercrombie for me is better than like a lot of books I read. So again, not sad I read it, just like a little let down in how much I think I had built up the book because I was just like so excited for another Abercrombie. You don't want to hear this. That's fine. You can ignore this review. It's funny to upset people over a medium review. But I have to be honest to you guys. I know Patrick Leo gave this 5 stars and said it might be one of his favorite books of the year, even though it's already early. And Mike from Mike's Book Reviews also gave it raving reviews. So if you want to counteract my medium review, go please watch their videos and get your hype back up. But yeah, for me, it was good. It was a solid Abercrombie, just for me, didn't quite come together in the way I hoped. Let me know. If you already have this pre-ordered and you're ready for May, let me know how you feel about this review and come back in May and tell me if you think I got it right or you think I got it wrong. As always, if you like these type of videos and reviews, please like and subscribe. That's the best way to support me. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading and get my reviews first before I do video reviews or see other nerdy rants, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.